You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Bronson.
Hey,
Bronson, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and if you want what you do professionally or whatever you want to talk about.
all right. So, my name is Bronson. I live in Southern California. These days, I'm really just focusing on the podcast actually that my wife and I run, but mainly I've been going through a online coding boot camp, and it's been fun and challenging. I started out wanting to actually teach, and I got my degree in education, but after getting in a kindergarten classroom and trying to teach about 20 kindergartners, people say it's like herding cats, and it really was. So I decided to go back to something I enjoyed and wanted to do in high school, and that was programming. So
Coding is pretty crazy. My cousin, he stayed with us over the summer and he showed me this coding book. And it was pretty interesting to see really the types of like what the codes really meant, like certain ones or certain code names, like things. It started to be like Fallout, like the video game. I don't know if you've ever played that, where it's like you're trying to hack a terminal. It's like there's secret little words that mean certain meanings or something.
yeah, the what I've noticed is that with different languages, you have like various syntaxes, and um, specifically, I'm going into iOS programming, and it's kind of crazy because it almost looks like English. They made the language to be very like readable, but then there are certain like words and phrases that are just very like cryptic, and it's kind of cool that when you start to understand it, you almost read it like English and you understand what it means, and you put it together and you get this really cool product.
Do you ever feel like you could maybe like look through emails and try and figure out what people are sending? Because I know some businesses use like secret code words and types of coding type things when they send emails, and actually people have to take those emails and encrypt them or decrypt them to be able to figure out what the person's saying, like a little like private message.
I don't actually know a whole lot about encryption. Um, i i do have a cousin who's into like data security, and he does penetration testing for companies. It's something that does interest me, but personally, no, I don't know a whole lot about that.
I just want to come across like a document where it's like the government's like aliens exist. I'm like, thank God I knew it. That's what this means. When you put pork and beans next to each other, that means aliens exist.
That would be funny.
Now, exactly what about the podcast is so, I guess, catched your fancy?
This one in particular, or
Yes. Not this podcast, your podcast.
okay, gotcha. Well, when when the pandemic hit, my wife and I were looking for something to do with our time at home. I was laid off, and she shortly after had to resign from her job. But uh, I had listened to podcasts before, but it was only like one or two episodes, just something to fill my time. And I've come to really enjoy them and see like the value in listening to a podcast. And uh, more specifically, we wanted to try making one because we have a group of friends that we used to play Dungeons and Dragons with.
Oh my God, this is a game that's close to my heart. The reason why I've never played it, but I've heard Dungeons and Dragons podcast. My buddy that owns All D20, the voices, the stories you can do in an episode is freaking fascinating. It's voice acting, dude. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. We had never played it before, and then just one day I had an old group of friends who were playing it at a nearby church, and I decided to try and get the group going up because they were going to stop playing, and I'm like, no, this is like kind of cool. Let's give it another shot. And I brought my wife in, and we started playing, and yeah, it's like I recommend you try it out. It's like you're just put in another world. You can do anything. There's stories to tell. It's wild. But
Now, when you're doing your podcast, though, are you doing voices? Are you trying to create a story like an audiobook for people to listen to? Or is it more like you guys are just kind of letting people sit in on your experience of playing the game together?
well, yeah, we try to have more of like a discussion about the game overall, offer advice for players who are new to the hobby or maybe thinking about getting into the hobby. We don't actually play on the podcast, although there was a time last year where we did try that, but it just didn't pan out properly, especially with like, we have sessions that go for like 3 or 4 hours, and it's hard to edit all that, I guess, especially with 6 people. So we were trying to experiment with a different format, and we found that actually just talking about the game, not only was it easier for us, but having about an hour long episode was easier for people to digest each week.
Kind of like break it up into segments so you're not just giving people like a 4-hour episode.
Yeah. And that was one thing we thought about maybe doing too.
Now, run me through like a typical episode, like if you're gonna, shoot one maybe that you've done or one that you're going to do.
Well, we do have one that we're hopefully going to film today, actually. And our process so far has been we'll conceptualize an idea beforehand, kind of outline it as far as what we're going to talk about. And then we have this format where we start in what we call the courtyard. And that's where we talk about our experiences with the game last week. And then what we're going to do in the future as far as playing the game. We talk about some RPG news that's up and coming in the RPG world. And then we move into mail time, where we answer questions that we receive on social media. We ask questions to our community, and then we head into what we call the tavern, and that's where we'll spend most of the time talking about our main topic for that week. Once we feel like we've said what we need to say, we'll move on to homebrew laboratory, and that's where we kind of whip up, mostly improv, a like a magic item or a new monster or something. We'll create something for the game, write up a little handout, and then put it out on our social media for people to steal and then put in their own games.
Now, are you fascinated with the old school medieval style type games? Because I mean, I am a child of RuneScape, I would say. And that is the one game where you can literally spend I think I spent 6 months total trying to get 99 wood cutting. And I don't regret any of that time at all. It's literally an achievement on my Snapchat memories. And I have a few skills where I've gotten a 99, but at work when they did the mobile app, oh, I got no work done ever. I was at a hotel and I was sitting in a room, just sitting there, letting my guy fish all the way to 99.
It's funny you bring that up, actually. Uh, I spent a lot of time chopping ivy on RuneScape for my 99. So I feel you there. Yeah, I played a lot of RuneScape growing up, me and my brother, and uh, there was this world. It was like the role playing world, and I accidentally logged into it one day, and there was people role playing, and that was like my first, I think, real experience with role playing, and I thought it was like funny, like what they were saying, what they were doing. And I looked into it some more, and I found out there were like guilds that would do this. They would dress up, they'd have like a thing they would want to act out, maybe go to free to play worlds and like just mess with people. And it led me to finding like a RuneScape role playing system, kind of like D&D, but it's in the RuneScape world. And there was just all this stuff out there that I had no idea existed. So I think playing these games growing up really like led to where I am now and being
People,
into Dungeons and Dragons.
people bring up this saying like you're just playing make believe, but honestly, that's the funnest part about it. It's the reason why I love games like Skyrim. I love games like World of Warcraft. I mean, World of Warcraft has RPGs a little bit bigger on the aspect of people that like to play the actual characters and
Mhm.
make the noises, do the voices. But like for me, it's a whole nostalgia thing. I played RuneScape with my brother all the time, and we would meet up in the game and trade, do cow hides, trying to get money as much as possible until they ended up changing it. But when you play like World of Warcraft and stuff too, being a druid was like my first character. You turn into an animal, you get to explore the world. It's all about connecting with friends and being able to relax. And I think the main thing when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, the reason why it's so expansive in the realm of just hanging out with your friends and the way time goes by so fast is because you're just friends hanging out. Nobody's worried about being weird or doing all these types of things. You just get to have fun and like go and truly fall into it. I mean, I always talk about I've wanted to play live action role play, LARPing for the longest time, but then it was always seen as nerdy and stuff. But I'm like, with all this stuff that used to be considered nerdy is now considered popular. I'm like, can we start hitting each other with foam swords? Maybe this will help with all the aggression in our world today.
Yeah, I think people have various reasons for going into this sort of hobby, and there certainly is like a stack of like layers that people get into it. Some people will just play the video game, play Skyrim, and that'll be their immersion. And then some people want D&D, and that's their immersion. And then of course there's like LARPing, which personally I've never done, but I think it is kind of cool. And we are seeing this trend where like stuff 10, 20 years ago that was like people put out of the way was like too nerdy, or oh, you don't do that. Now it's like actually in the spotlight, and you see a lot of like large YouTube channels showcasing these games and these activities. And I think that's in a way it's kind of funny that we've seen that shift, but it's also really cool that a lot of people are getting to experience it now, whereas previously they probably would have been peer pressured not to.
Yeah, like if you look at a movie that came out a while ago called Role Models, where it's with Paul Rudd, where he does the LARPing thing and he's like making fun of it the whole time. I don't know if you ever seen that movie.
I haven't actually.
Well, literally, they're supposed to do this. Like these guys get arrested, and their kind of thing they have to do to make sure they don't go to jail is they have to mentor a young child. And one of the kids who plays McLovin in Superbad uh, likes to LARP, and the one dude tries to go into it and everything, and he had to go into timeout or jail, they would say. And he had his
Mm.
hands tied behind a light pole, and he's just sitting there like, I want to die. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. And then the car rolls up. And he goes, "Oh, thank God!" And he undoes the handcuffs. You realize he was just holding them behind his back the whole time, imaginary. He could have left at any moment. But they ended up recreating their own guild, and it was called Kiss My Anthea, and it was based off the band Kiss. They all dressed up like the four members of Kiss, and it was insane to see that how into it they got. And I'm like, that's what's the fun about it, is that you can like, why are we worried about trying to act like an adult? Like, it's not acting like a child doing this, but it's about having fun. Like, some people that dress up, even I've talked to people that are real life blacksmiths where they create their own weapons for LARPing. I'm like, you understand, if you stab somebody with that, you are going to jail. That is straight up jail time. And they're like, well, it's just meant to, you swing it near them. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, if you're not going to see fake screaming if you're swinging that actual mace at me. You're going to hear real screaming, and it's going to be high pitched. I'll tell you that much. But I love that type of stuff because, I mean, what do people always get into when it comes to a normal board game? The first one that comes to your mind is Monopoly. If you're more than happy with owning every single damn property and charging your parents rent that teaches you all about communism, why can't you learn about orcs and ogres and all these other types of species out there and actually have fun with it, more creating a team effort and winning on an objective rather than just making your parents broke?
Yeah, my it's funny you bring up Monopoly too, because my wife and her family, they played a lot of board games. They had like her sister collects like every version of Monopoly you can think of. She has a closet full of them, and that's like kind of all they played were these, like, I guess you would consider it like mainstream board games. And then after like we got into D&D, we also discovered like, hey, there's a lot more board games out there, and there's a lot of like kind of obscure ones. And I had this friend that would collect board games too, and he hated Monopoly, and he thought it was hilarious that my wife's sister had so many copies of it. But um,
I like the original. I don't like when they involved credit cards because then the currency went to billions of dollars, and you're like, I'm in debt already. I don't like this. Is too close to real life.
yeah, you play it to escape life, not to simulate it, I guess.
Exactly. I had a buddy on, Mark McKinnon. He created his own tabletop game, and he made it like the movie Mad Max. And I was like, well, how are you creating your characters? And he goes, well, you get this, and your mount would be you get a rhino with machine guns attached to the side of his head. And I'm like, well, why isn't this in Toys R Us when I go? But instead you find a Ouija board where you have to be above the age of 9 to summon the devil. I don't understand why we're not getting any light on these games. There was one that came out a long time ago that if you look up now on eBay is hundreds of dollars for the starter set. It's called Heroescape. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I've heard of it, but I don't know if I'm confident in explaining what it is.
It was like, I mean, for me, it was like they look like little action figures on little stands, kind of like HeroClix is, where they have
Okay.
credibles and stuff. But this was like supposed to be a little, you create your own board and everything. You get these land pieces that are water and all these things, but you get these different packs of characters where you could create whatever you wanted. And I'd go against my older brother, so he obviously could trade with his friends, and I was just stuck to the ones I got from like my parents as like, oh, here's an allowance, go buy some whatever. And I would, but the weird thing was the amount of characters. There was cowboys, there was aliens, there was monks, there was dragons, there was angels, there was demons. There's the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And I would always create a specific team and stick with certain characteristics and stuff. Same reason if you're creating a character in RuneScape or World of Warcraft, you pick something to your likability. So what's your likability in a character? Do you search for a mage? Do you search for a warrior? Do you search for an archer?
Well, personally, I tend to gravitate towards like a thief, and I think that just fits like my play style. Even in like games like Skyrim, I like the slower, more cautious approach to things, and at least in D&D, I feel like the rogue class just really fits that for me very well, and that's when I do play, tends to be what I go for.
Okay, so you like kind of the quick and the dexterity part. It seems like when you have a thief in the group, it's more on relying of like intelligence a little bit too, being able to get out of like a nifty situation, I would say.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of people don't actually see it that way too. And although the class is designed that way, they're supposed to be the more like intelligent, like mastermind of the party. But then when you look at everything like a thief gets, it seems like it's very just like almost like an assassin. Like it's just very dexterous and there's a lot of damage involved. But actually, they're very intelligent.
Yeah, with like a rogue, I mean, you have to think on the aspect of like if you're going down to subclasses like hunter, but usually if you talk about a rogue, it's usually like the thief class, and the thief class usually is very good at setting traps. I'm like, first of all, if anybody has ever been hunting in real life, setting a trap, you need to be intelligent as hell. I'm
I
just
agree.
saying, because I mean, I've seen like it's like the movie The Revenant where he's setting the trap for like one of those animals and he's got to put a snare and then he's got to put a thing down. I'm like, that just takes skill
Hmm.
and remembrance in the first place. So it's always nice to have those in the group. They're usually pretty quick at attacking.
Totally.
Now, what would you say would be your worst favorite, like your worst class? Like if you're gonna choose one where you're like, I just don't even care. I'm gonna pick this.
Oh man. Let's see. I would say for me, it would be a bard.
Hard.
I Yeah, like a musical caster. They would use like an instrument to maybe not produce their magic, but they use it in tandem with their magic. And I think that's a cool concept. I just think like of the games that I've experienced a bard in, they don't really fit how I like to play characters. And they do get a lot of like flack online, or there's a lot of stereotypes with people who play bards. I think it's hilarious, but I I just don't love the class, I guess.
I look at that with two things. I think of it in the Skyrim way, where it's like the guy just won't shut the hell up and you just want to chop his head off and throw him in a well. And then I look at it like, imagine if Jack Black was a bard. Like if he did Tenacious D as a bard, imagine the stuff you could create if you're just singing and making something with that.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of bards just like to endlessly monologue. So I think it's more of the former, which people have problems with. But there are some cool bards out there, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit like the narrator kind of telling a story or some type of thing that happened. It's like, all right, man, we're in the middle of a giant cavern right now, and there's spikes literally aiming towards us, and you're just singing a song about Old Town Road. I'm not a big fan. Not a big fan.
Exactly.
What would you say when you guys get together and you guys, record an episode, or you guys just play D&D together, what do you say like your favorite thing about it is?
I think it's well, if we're talking about the podcast and what we record, I just like, we don't get to play very much these days, but I do like the conversation because in the moment it almost leads me to thinking about things that I haven't maybe ever thought of before. Like when we're throwing questions back and forth, there's maybe a discussion will spark that I've never actually had with somebody. And that's great because it leads me to forming new opinions about things. But then also it's just nice to kind of talk, I guess, about the game in general. I just love discussing it. And then actually playing the game, I just like the stories that we form. I mean, I have stories from like the past 6 years of various campaigns that we've had, and that's kind of what the game is supposed to be. It's a collective storytelling effort. Like you and your players, you all work together to craft a story.
Yeah, like kind of like so you would consider yourself the dungeon master, or is it more of a group effort?
I am the dungeon master usually for a group, but I can't take all the credit. I mean, I have players that come up with the wackiest antics, and some of it's usually funny, but sometimes it's a complication when you're the DM and you have to figure out how to justify or make sense of something your player just did. Because I usually don't retcon things that happen. If you do it, it's done. We're going forward with it.
It's also like a lot of people talk about like the dungeon master can't play only on the basis of they got to stay impartial to the game. I don't know if you ever seen the show Community.
Yeah,
That see, like things like that, Stranger Things, all these things where they start actually playing Dungeons and Dragons, I think is what made it so freaking popular now. Is that like you're realizing, like, oh my god, like this show's so popular, so these guys can't be nerds. And it's like, why was Dungeons and Dragons considered nerds for so long? You know how closeted I had to keep that? Like the whole fact of not playing Dungeons and Dragons, but World of Warcraft, and then you figure out
yeah.
like RuneScape. I knew so many people that played RuneScape, and I was like, why is everyone afraid to talk about this? It's like talking about masturbation. We're all doing it, but nobody wants to mention it. I'm like, come on now. Like, why do I feel like the guy, the odd man out, because I'm sitting here working on my leather working skills, and you're sitting
Hmm.
there talking about the football game last night? Like, hey, you know what? I'm done talking about the Baltimore Ravens. I'd like to talk about that freaking goblin that took all my gold last night.
Yeah. I played WoW too for a while, and I didn't experience that whole like, oh, I have to keep this to myself with D&D, because we actually just got into it in like 2014, and that's kind of when it was cool, right? But like WoW and RuneScape, playing that growing up, you really did have to keep that under wraps if you went to school. Like, you would go with your friend group who played it, and maybe you could talk about it with them. But then I remembered like the majority of kids, at least at my school, they didn't play those kind of games. So um, you really didn't want to be, I guess, known as somebody who did.
I know, which really sucks because I'm like, you know how much I left on the table when I was like, I'm too old to play RuneScape. And then now I'm freaking 22 buying like membership to play old school RuneScape just to capture that little sliver of nostalgia. Oh man, I'll tell you, my buddy he works at a hotel, so a little bit different from my position at a hotel, which was I was a houseman, so you had to sneak into a room and when nobody was in there and be able to play on your phone or something. He does the customer service, so he's just sitting there answering phone calls and playing World of Warcraft and stuff. And I'm like, wow, like you can literally, wow, like you can just play and have fun. And you start to realize like it is an escape, man. Like I always loved the medieval period. I love playing Assassin's Creed, learning about the storylines and stuff. But it's also the amount like of just being free, man, because it's about the creativity, it's about the passion. I think the reason why Dungeons and Dragons seems a little bit more popular is just because you're more of interacting with your friends. It's more of like a we all need to be here in person. You can do that on World of Warcraft, but it's still over the computer. But if you notice people that bring their computers over to their friends' houses and they pull up WoW and then it's all of them talking into a room, that's a hell of a lot more fun than just doing it over the computer. And your buddy's at his
Yeah.
house and you're at your own house. But I wonder, what was the future, do you think, of Dungeons and Dragons? Do you think it's gonna turn into like maybe virtual reality where you can put on goggles and actually see some of the landscapes instead of having to buy like hundreds and hundreds of pieces?
You know, We are, I think, virtual reality and augmented reality are cool, but they're sort of in their infancy right now, and we're seeing some pretty good leaps. And what I would like to see is augmented reality first, honestly, where and you've seen this with certain apps where you could have like maybe a Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon card and you lay it down and then like the creature on the card is sort of like it pops up as a 3D model on top of the card and you can like move it around and it follows it. There actually is a game called Tabletop Simulator on Steam, and I've actually seen people run D&D campaigns in it because there's actually 3D models in the game itself that you can put on the table, and they're like animated. They move around and you can have them like fall down and die or attack. And what I thought is like that would be so cool if like your D&D group had glasses and you're playing D&D and D and you have like the big grid, everybody's miniatures out, except the miniatures are like these little discs that the glasses project, well not really project, but like your character shows up on the disc and then the DM can do the same with like NPCs and monsters. So you get these like animated augmented reality characters on the board. And I think that would be a really cool like leap that's not too far off in the future. And then I think my belief where the end game is would be something like Sword Art Online. You have like a DM that controls the scene and pulls all the strings from like behind the curtain, and then the players actually are in the game and like almost feel what their characters would feel, maybe minus the pain. But I think that would be like the ultimate end game for virtual reality and D&D.
It's freaking Spy Kids. Oh my
Basically,
God, it's like where you transport and you get see, that would make it a lot more entertaining, I think, because I think a lot of people that don't really play Dungeons and Dragons is it's very hard to visualize and
yeah,
have the imagination factor in behind it. Like I know people that set up like they have studios and rooms with like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars just thrown into board game mapping and then also characters and little figurines and all these things, and that's awesome. I think that's a cool way to play too, but it really relies on a lot of creativity. I mean, like for instance, if you're with your gang or you're rolling with your party and you come across a trail, you have to create an obstacle or something that might pop up in the way, and how are they going to overcome it? You have to be very, planned out with thinking of, oh, if I do this, what's going to happen to that? What's going to be the consequence to that? Is it even going to work? And
yeah,
I think that's the whole fun part about it. It's like really kind of being spontaneous in a way of planning, which is like seems counterintuitive, but it really is interesting. Like, I had a person on, his name's Paul Schultz, but he creates 3D models of the figurines that you can use. And he just comes up with random ideas, but he loves playing it with his kids.
mhm,
He's showing them. And I think that's a great way. I would have loved to play Dungeons and Dragons rather than play Monopoly. It's fun and all, but I'm always stuck being the freaking shoe or the thimble. And that's like the one character nobody ever wants to be. So I'm like, that's not fun
yeah.
for me.
Nobody wants to be a shoe.
Mm.
You
Well,
know, I feel like if you're wanting to play as a player and not a DM, I think a lack of creativity or imagination is okay because that's something you can develop as you play. And I think most people would develop that fairly soon because I've heard of people like who, even wanting to join my own campaigns, but their hesitation is, oh, well, I'm not creative or I have no imagination. And I'm thinking like, well, everybody does have some imagination and creativity to a degree, but that's something you can flesh out while you play. And if you're wanting to become a dungeon master, then I would say like the same rule applies, but it is much like it is preferred to have these skills developed coming into it just so everybody has a better experience. But it's I would say it's by no means like mandatory.
yeah, I feel like it especially gets a little bit easier too. Like I know some people that like they'll drink whiskey on their show or something, and next thing you know, they open up. And I'm like, it's about that. You're meant to have fun. If you're too worried about, acting out or doing something because you're afraid if someone's gonna think or if they're gonna think you're nerdy, I'm like, no. Me and my buddy, we made a challenge when we played Monopoly, and it was the credit card one, and that's where I realized my hatred for it was the loser had to chug a giant bottle of the bomb hot sauce. So it was like, who you're
Ooh,
basically playing for your life right now. This is like there's actual
yeah.
hit points you're going to be experiencing. But it's that fun aspect of it. I think that's why Skyrim and Fallout have become so popular, is not only their influence, but the time periods they let you slip into. I'm a big person on character creation. Um, just Dungeons and Dragons, I've never had I guess, friends that would want to get down and play. Like I know certain parties and people talk about, I can't, I'm dungeoning this week. I'm like, all right, well, can
Yeah.
I join in on that? It's kind of an exclusive group. I'm like, all right, fuck you too. Like I wanna learn, man. It seems like a great experience from everything I've watched and everything I've heard of. You can tell like the fun behind it.
Yeah, and I've tried to get people in my gaming groups wanting to play, and these were games, Final Fantasy 14, World of Warcraft, RuneScape. But I feel like with MMORPGs, there's such a grind ahead, and I'm sure you know that from your woodcutting days, that just stopping for 4 hours to play D&D is like, it's actually kind of a hard sell for these people, especially when you're wrapped up in it and you're trying to grind. Um, and what people have tried to do is like grind while we're playing D&D, and you can tell they're out there grinding because they're like, "Oh wait, what happened? Sorry, I was fishing or I was banking." And it's like such a shame because it's so closely tied into what they love, and if they just played it, I feel like they'd like it more almost.
Would I ever want to get back my time playing RuneScape? No. Only on the factor of it might have been like something where it's like a lot of time got invested to it. I think to get a 99 skill, or I think the route from 98 to 99 is a little like a legit month of like every hour playing. And honestly, I just did it as background stuff, but I love the experience and I feel so entitled when I have that cape that I can walk around with that has the symbol on it. I'm
Yeah.
like, I am a boss and none of you guys can compare to me. And then you see some guy with like $1 billion armor. I actually have a really crazy experience. So when you're working and you're not really doing anything else, you're just kind of saving your money, you start to buy dumb shit. Okay, you start to literally be like, well, I don't really, I have a lot of money, I might as well buy $50 for Yu-Gi-Oh cards or something. Well, at 1 o'clock in the morning was a lot of the time I played my RuneScape, and I looked up an online service on RuneScape to
Uh-oh.
buy real gold. So I get to this website, type in your email, type in your phone number, type in all these things. I do all the information needed. Then it asks for my bank card. And this is where I should have stopped, but I didn't. I finished it and submitted it. And then I swear to you, I get a call on my phone. This was about 3 years ago. And it said an unknown caller. And I said, usually it says restricted. Why is it saying unknown? So I answer it, and a Chinese woman is on the phone and she goes, "Is this Robbie?" I said, "Yeah. Did you just submit this or cert this?" It had my ticket number that I got within my email. And "Did you submit this?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Okay, check your RuneScape account in 2 minutes." And then hung up. And I'm like, what the fuck did I
It's so
sign up?
ominous.
Yeah. And I log into my RuneScape and I get a random message from a user, and it said, "Meet me at the Varrock Bank," which is like one of the first starting out places. I'm like, okay. So I'm standing there and a random dude comes up, no armor on, basically just regular clothes, comes up, trades with me. I hit okay. It's the exact amount of gold that I needed. It was 5 billion. And he puts it over into the 5 billion or 5 million. He puts it into
Mhm.
the transfer thing. And I'm like, okay. He accepts the trade. Bam. I type in the message, "Thank you." And before I could hit the thank you, it said this player is no longer available, or this player doesn't exist. And I could not find the person. I was like, what the
Wow.
fuck? That is the most random thing at 2 o'clock in the morning to be experiencing.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I've been down that route before too. I'm desperate for gold, and I convinced my mom to buy me. I think it was 3 million, like way back in the day. Like this must have been like 2008, and it was funny because you could tell like it was a gold seller because we're in like Falador, and there's all these people trying to sell stuff, and then there's this guy in like the default clothes just standing there with a line of people waiting to get their gold, and I just joined the line, and
And
he
it's the
trades me.
same copy and paste answer that's all
Yeah.
highlighted in the script. You're like, how is he doing that?
Yeah, he trades me. It's just like, thanks. That's it. I'm like, okay, do I just leave now? He doesn't answer. Another guy trades him. And I felt so guilty walking away. I'm like, what did I do something illegal? Like it literally felt like a drug deal. But I mean, your experience sounds a lot more ominous.
It's literally like you had to take a shower afterwards just to wash the moment off of you. Like I was so creeped out to the point where this woman was like, "Is this Robbie?" But she said it like so unintelligible, where it was like, "Is this Robbie?" I said, "Yes." She goes, "Meet at the Verak Bank in 2 minutes," and then hung up. And I'm like, "What the fuck? Like, am I gonna get murdered?"
That's
And
weird.
then after that whole situation, I felt like a god. I was walking around and people were like, "Can I have some gold?" I'm like, "Here, peasants," and then give them like a little bit of gold. The next thing you know, you're broke again, and then you have no armor, and then you're like, "Oh god, here we go." I gotta log into my old account. I had two accounts because I got so scared that I switched all the gold from my main into a private one because my account did get hacked. And I was like, all right, I don't want that to happen again after that deal. So I thought they were trying to get it back. So I changed all my passwords and usernames. I guarantee you if I log in right now, I still have that gold sitting in my bank.
Yeah. It's always nice to go back every once in a while and experience the nostalgia. And then once that wears off, the magic starts to fade away, but it's still fun.
I always loved like the events they did during Christmas or Easter or something where you get like a special dance or you get like a special outfit. I'm like, this is awesome. I love it that they're like, they're obviously not playing with what's going on in the times now, but it's still like, hey, it's Christmas time. We're going to do a special event for you to make it feel a little bit more like Christmas around here. They put decorations up. You're like, oh my God, I, I hate Christmas. It's like, oh, well, too bad. You're going to be drowned with it for a month.
Yeah, that was always nice that they would go out of their way to do events because they didn't have to. Some other games didn't do it at the time, but it was something to look forward to for sure as a player.
What would you say the most memorable thing you have done so far with the group? Like if you had to choose a certain scenario, maybe not like a favorite class or anything, but
Hmm.
like a memorable quest or campaign you went on. Did it happen to involve anything that might have been going on in your life? I know some people that were like, I honestly, that's probably the best way to have an intervention. If someone has like a drinking problem, like we have to stop this greedy king that's an alcoholic and mean to all of his friends. It's like, hang on a second, is this? It seems like we're attacking me a little bit over here, guys.
um, let's see. The most memorable moment, honestly, I think was our first adventure that we ever had, and this was back in 2014. I was going off of the module that I had bought with a starter kit, and it's like your typical like oh, your adventures meet in the tavern. They look for a job, and then this guy wants you to escort his goods, his items over to a nearby town because there's roadside bandits, goblins, whatever. It's bad. You need to help them out. So the players get on the wagon and they head south towards the town. And I'm looking in the book, and the first encounter is like a goblin ambush. They jump out of the trees. They have bows. They have blow darts. Whatever it is, they're going to attack the players. So my players dispatched of them pretty quickly, and that was our first combat encounter. And I just remember it felt really good to like control all these NPCs. It's like a video game, but I'm in control kind of. And then the players are like, they have so much, like so many options that they can do. I mean, you could shoot the goblin or you could roll a persuasion check and try and get it to join your adventure. And you can't do that in a lot of games, only in D&D really. And I remember like reading a few pages ahead to see where's all this going. And I didn't quite like where it was going because it was like still like your cliche, like, oh, they're gonna get to a dungeon, they're gonna clear the dungeon and then get their level up, and then you can end the campaign or keep going with a different module. So I just went off the rails. Like I totally just like closed the book. All right, this is what happens next. Like this is my story now. And it got kind of weird, but it led up to this moment where the party was climbing down a like a very long shaft. It was like a mine shaft, and my wife goes in last, but she failed her check to climb. So all she like starts tumbling down this shaft, and all of the like the pickaxes, shovels, her bedroll, her rope, everything just falls out of her bag and starts falling down the mine shaft as people are trying to cautiously climb down the mine shaft. And it's like all the items just start pummeling them. It's and people are like trying to hold on while they're being hit with pickaxes, all these items, and people are starting to fall. So like Now everybody's free falling down this mine shaft. They have no idea what's at the bottom, and they're being like scraped and pierced by all these tools, and then they finally fall into a lake. Because I didn't want to just kill the whole party by having them fall and hit ground.
Damn
But
it, Jenny. You couldn't pass the spell check. Come on now. I just immediately started thinking of like what the conversation must have been with getting hit with items where someone's like, ow, was that your Fitbit? Like, what the hell?
Yeah, it was great. And I don't think there was any like ill will, but they had to role play it in character. They didn't know where the items came from, so they couldn't be mad at her in character. But she did fess up and say that it was her.
Have you ever played Diablo 3?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I didn't know when it meant like hardcore mode that meant like your character dies and never comes back. So I entered my like high level character into the hardcore mode to do like the campaign over again, and he died like in the third map. And I was like, that's okay, I'll just play him again. And it's like hung into the Hall of Remembrance or whatever. And then like it's your character and you're trying to click A, but it's like you can't play him anymore. I'm like, what's happening? Like that was the moment that the childhoodness and the innocence died and I became a man, because I was like, I fucking hate this game. I can't believe this just happened to me. My character, I spent so much time into getting a mastery skill and just going up and up and up, and I got these badass angel wings, and now you're telling me I can't play him anymore. Wonderful. It's like, well, that's why you need to be cautious when you're playing the game. I'm like, but sometimes I like to hack and smash. It's like Castle Crashers. You want to see a deer experience diarrhea, you want to see a bear experience diarrhea, and you just want to have fun.
Yeah, Castle Crashers is great. If you ever play D&D, I recommend the Barbarian, because you get to the point where you're just too mad to die and you just break stuff, and there's a build out there that you can do where even if you die, you just keep fighting. You like fight beyond death. You're just too mad to die. And that reminds me of or what you're describing reminds me of that play style of like just get in there and break stuff.
That's literally, it's like when I play, like if I play Call of Duty and stuff, I notice the people like that last long in Search and Destroy, where they just hide and they're going around every slow corner doing a slow creep. I'm just the guy at the start of the round that just runs all completely to the other side and just starts trying to shoot people as much as possible. I'm like, look, I don't have time. Like I need to get it. Like it's like trying to get a fix. It's like I need to go get it right now. I can't just say, what do you mean? No, don't go prone and cry and crawl the whole entire length of the map. What are you doing? Like, we got to sprint as fast as we possibly can with dual wield pistols and just kill everybody.
Yeah, the slow and steady is definitely my play style. So I think, yeah, I'm the rogue and you're the barbarian.
I love it when like you see the videos on YouTube or something where it's like people like experiencing real life lag or something, and it's like you always have the one member of the group that just charges in first, and
Yep.
then you just see on the thing like, where'd John go? He already ran over to the other side, and then you just see John has died, and it's like the first kill of the game. It's like you just hear that person screaming in the chat. Like I don't know if you played 360 back in the day on live, but in Modern Warfare 2, whenever somebody would die, you would hear them scream before it would just cut. So it would be like, son of a, and then it would just cut and they'd be in the lobby like, oh my God, that was the funniest shit.
Yeah, I remember a buddy of mine would play Search and Destroy, and we'd be like really like cautious and slow, and hey, do you see him? No, I don't. And he would just cut out and he would die. I'm like, oh god, he's around here.
Yeah, the type of anxiety you get, like, oh my God, I'm next. I can't believe I'm the last one alive. There's 6 people left. That's a moment where I could understand where people just leave the game. Like, why'd he leave? It said he lagged out. No, he left the game. Why? Because you know how amount of pressure that is?
Yeah.
One person going against 6 people and everybody's just watching you like, don't you fuck up and lose this for everybody. And you're just like, I can't do it. Mom, anxiety.
Yeah, that was my experience with Counter-Strike too. People just chanting clutch or kick, and I'm like the last one alive. I'm like, I can't clutch this. Don't say this to me.
This is worse than when I had to study to graduate college.
Yeah.
I wasn't built for this type of experience.
Yeah, those were the days.
Well, exactly. When it comes down to a type of, do you guys incorporate any foods? I mean, you guys have to have a game night snack. Come on now.
I think Takis were big for a while, but it makes a mess. It's like hot Cheeto fingers. We we stopped doing food like that. But it didn't start out that way. But then very quickly, I think after a few sessions, we were that stereotypical group of like everybody brings snacks, a couple people would bring some beers, and we would just play D&D. And I think that's like what it should be, like just friends having a good time. Bring some snacks, have some drinks, and just have some good times with the story.
Who got Doritos dust on the 20-sided dice? What
Uh,
is happening?
I don't want to name drop, but yeah, there was a player.
I think like I've heard people say like, oh, I like to do finger sandwiches. I'm like, oh, you're getting exotic with it. And then some person just tosses out, I like to bring prawns. You're like, what the fuck? This is a crab feast while you're playing Dungeons and Dragons? That doesn't make any sense. But like, I feel like we all, like when I used to play Monopoly or something, we play a board game, it's going to last long. You bring like a special drink if you're going to a friend's house. Like, we're about to play World of Warcraft all night. I got a 2-liter of Mountain Dew for us. It's like, oh, that's where Domino's came in handy, bro. Oregano on the crust while you're playing RuneScape, that was a night adventure. I remember my buddy's dad would come down at like 3:00 in the morning, and he was in the army. So basically that means you're coming down in your underwear and you don't really give a shit about who else is over. So he would be like, Dad, you're in your underwear. He goes, I own this house, damn it. It's like, okay. But like we'd be playing like World of Warcraft or RuneScape at like 3:00 in the morning. And like, hey, guys, keep it down. It's 3:00 in the morning. And then his dad would just come downstairs and be like, what you guys doing? Like stretching in the doorway. And he's like, Dad, you're in your underwear. It's like, yeah, but you're playing RuneScape, bunch of nerds. And would just walk out. You're just like, your dad accepts me.
That's funny. Yeah. I don't know. I think back to all these times that I've had playing RuneScape and other games, and a lot of people seem to think like, oh, it's a waste of time. Don't you wish you had that time back? And like you said, like for me, no, I don't think I would trade that, because I do have so many good like memories growing up with it, and especially like playing with my brother, because I think for the longest time, like we've known like he's been losing his eyesight, and back then, it was a lot easier for him to play, and not so much these days, but we had like so many good experiences together that I don't know, like if we decided to later, we'd be able to replicate. And I think that's just cool to think back on.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at somebody saying that it's a waste of time, be like, how many times and how many hours do you spend on your phone just mindlessly scrolling through nonsense without even knowing
Watching
what you're
TV or
scrolling at?
something.
Yeah, like I've seen the same movie on Disney Plus, Hercules animated, over and over and over again. And I don't really regret any of it, but at the same time, like there's no difference in doing that and shopping on Amazon and doing all these other things. And it's like we live in a world where everything is kind of trying to capture our attention every couple of minutes. And I think the best way to do that is if you can experience that with friends. Nobody's
Hmm.
wasting hours. You're finding a way to connect and stay connected in a world where it seems like connection is lost.
Yeah. I mean, if you need to decompress and escape for a little while, there's no shame in doing that, especially if it drags on to 6 hours. Hey, like if you're having fun, you're having fun.
Exactly. And Bronson, I appreciate you for coming out and doing the podcast, man. Seriously.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It's been great.
Please plug everything, your podcast, your Instagram page, everything.
Well, our podcast is called Adventuring Allies, and you can find us on pretty much every platform. Anchor does a good job of just shilling us out everywhere. So wherever you want to hear us, go ahead. I think the only other thing is you can find me on Twitter at Bronson Mullens. I do write fantasy, so if you're ever interested in what me and my players have gotten into, I do try to write novels that are heavily inspired by our antics. So
A little
yeah,
bit of H.P. Lovecraft in there.
a touch. There is some strange otherworldly elements.
You cannot go wrong with summoning Cthulhu at any point in my life. I don't know if there's an actual ritual to be able to do that, but that would be awesome.
Nothing wrong with that.